I'm Joanna. The Summer Palace which is where we are, is a beautiful example of Chinese architecture and lavish spending. The park as seen today remains as a beautiful public gardens, but the history that surrounds the palace prior to the middle of the 1900s is a beautiful but complicated story of which we can only graze over the surface, but we will do our best to explain the magnificent beauty and culture that surrounds the palace.
With 75% of the park being bodies of water, the Summer Palace spans nearly 3 square kilometers, which is roughly almost 2 miles. Highlighting the Hill of Longevity in Kunming Lake, the inception of the Summer Palace dates back nearly 1,000 years to the Jin Dynasty, when Emperor Wan Yaoliang built God Mountain Palace at the location now known as Longevity Hill. Longevity Hill and Kunming Lake were named several times by a succession of emperors and legends throughout history before their current designations. Longevity Hill is part of the Yan Mountain range and is 58.59 meters high. As the grounds expanded and Kunming Lake was enlarged, some of the soil was transferred from the hill to make it more balanced and symmetrical. The mound became the prominent fixture of the getaway where ancient and modern Chinese architecture meets, and we'll see some of that as we kind of move around. One legend was responsible for naming the hill as Jug Mountain. According to the story, an old man discovered a jar inside of a rock on the slope of a mountain. The jar was beautifully carved with dragons and wildlife and contained valuable items. Prior to leaving the mountain, the old man placed a jar on the sunny side of the mountain carved with the following statement: "When this earthen jar is moved, the emperor's decline shall begin." This was supposedly proven true when the jar vanished during the Ming Dynasty. Kunming Lake was previously known as Jug Mountain Lake and other names. It was formed in 1292 when irrigation work was extended by the famous Chinese scientist Guo Zhaojing. It brought all the flowing water from north of Beijing to the base of Jug Mountain to aid in grain transport. Spring water was redirected from the Divine Mountains in Changping to increase the existing natural lake, which some research states dates back over 3,500 years. During the Ming Dynasty, numerous lotus flowers were planted in the lake, while rice paddies and exquisite structures surrounded the water, which made it look like southern China. It was known as West Lake during that time. In mid-18th century, Emperor Zhonglong expanded the lake to its current size and constructed the Temple of Gratitude on Longevity Hill in honor of his mother's 60th birthday. He renamed the lake Kunming Lake after the artificial lake Kunming Pool, which was created for rehearsing war battles. Thus, the present-day names of Longevity Hill and Kunming Lake were assigned to the two prominent topographical features. Emperor Qinglong named the area Park of Pure Ripples. A 9.8-meter-high stele carved from a single rock displays 6 Chinese characters in Emperor Kunlong's calligraphy, meaning Longevity Hill, Kunming Lake. On the reverse of the pillar is an essay written by the emperor on how and why the lake was expanded. He is credited with designing, developing, and building up the areas that comprise the Summer Palace. The Summer Palace served as a getaway for emperors, a place to retreat from the political pressures and bustle of the imperial city. Upon conquering China, the Manchus even relocated their courts to the Summer Palace to avoid the dense, forbidden city. It was an intimate place for emperors to practice hobbies that made them unique, not just a leader in a series of leaders. They could take relaxing walks in nature, enjoy solitude, practice calligraphy, Turkish dancing, and other activities not usually included in their daily lives as rulers. Emperor Qinglong created nearly 100 different scenes of nature and architecture in the gardens to suit his liking. He is quoted as saying, "Every emperor and ruler, when he has returned from audience and has finished his public duties, must have a garden where he might stroll about and relax his heart." Areas of the garden were also designed to allow emperors to experience other lifestyles such as farming or sailing or conducting mock naval battles. Daily tasks outside of the world, such as shopping and the market, were recreated for the emperors who rarely got to enjoy common life. Great lengths were taken to simulate a real market. Fights would erupt and men would be arrested, tried, and sentenced to a beating, everything to make the market real. Even pickpockets were in attendance. Although it was a site of tranquility, peace, and theatrics, the Summer Palace was also the site of significant destruction in Chinese history.
Where we're currently standing is Shizhao Street, and a little bit of the history of how this street came to be was Emperor Qinglong came to the Quanzhong Temple to see
Quanzhong.
What?
Quanzhong.
Temple to see his beautiful nun that was his favorite concubine. And she was like really upset and told him that she was homesick and she really wanted to visit Shizhao, which was the town she was originally from. So Qinglong told her he would take her there in 6 months, and when the time came, they got into a carriage and drove an hour, and she couldn't believe that they got there in that amount of time. And so when she got here, she saw all the merchants, and it looked exactly like her hometown, and what he had done was built up a street of merchants and marketplaces to represent Shizhao, where she was originally from, and that's how it came to be called Shizhao Market Street. The market has 60 stores that line from the North Palace Gate along Shizhao Street along Back Lake, which is also where we're standing. This is a place where emperors and concubines would go to feel like regular citizens, like on any kind of commercial street. And when royals would go there, their maids and people that waited on them would pretend to be shopkeepers and peddlers to mimic actual market activities. The market was burned down during the Opium War of 1860, and it was rebuilt and opened to the public in 1990, and now holds drugstores, banks, souvenir shops, and tea shops, and clerks dressed in traditional Qing Dynasty attire.
So they replicated a whole city in this little pocket of the park, huh? Wow, very interesting.
Right, this is the Hall of Benevolence and Longevity. It was first built by Emperor Xinglong in 1750, and it was known as the Hall of Diligent Government. Emperor Guangju rebuilt it in the same place after it burned down in the first attack, and it was renamed in reference to Confucius saying, "The benevolent enjoy longevity." Shishi and Guangju actually handled court affairs here, and it became the Summer Palace's main government building.
So I'm going to talk about the attacks that happened on the palace before I talk about what we're standing right next to. During the Second Opium War, which was 1856 to 1860, and was a war between China and the West, Europe was smuggling opium into China to balance out the purchase of tea, and China began to put restrictions on opium trade and destroyed any that came into the country, causing Europe to attack China to end restrictions on foreign trade. Anglo-French troops destroyed a large portion of the old summer palace during the war and left it nearly in ruins. But before they burned the palace, they stole most of the treasures and expensive gifts that lied within the palace itself. After the devastation, Suchet began to rebuild the palace in 1886 by using funds that had been specifically reserved for the Chinese Navy, and by redistributing these funds, she caused China to be drastically affected during the Sino-Japanese War. The money became earmarked for her to use them for the summer palace after her brother-in-law was appointed to the head of the Navy, and he wanted to gain favors from her. So he was basically the reason that all that money was redirected for her to build the summer palace. When the summer palace was originally burned due to a large amount of water that surrounds the grounds, some of the buildings managed to survive. The 13 buildings managed to survive throughout the Opium War, and when the gardens were rebuilt, they were renamed the Garden of Health and Harmony. However, in 1900, the palace was again attacked by Allied forces and burned almost completely to the ground, leaving no complete building standing. And Hugo, a famous French author, described the attack as, "One day, two robbers rushed into the palace. One was busy robbing and the other taking pleasure in setting fire. They returned cheerfully to Europe, and they were respectively called France and Britain. They shared the old summer palace, the Oriental treasure house, and chuckled to themselves that they had achieved a great victory." The attack on the palace again happened in 1900 during the Boxer Rebellion, mainly because of Suchet's ties to Boxer support. The Boxer Rebellion is a pro-nationalist movement which opposed foreign forces in Christianity. After pressure from the imperial court, Empress Dowager Suchet decided to back the Boxers in China and declared war on foreign powers. During the war, Suchet was concerned about how China was faring against the foreigners and said, "Perhaps their magic is not to be relied upon, but can we not rely on the hearts and minds of the people? Today China is extremely weak, and we only have the people's hearts and minds to depend on."